You're welcome.
Well, good morning. Hello, everybody. My name is Chanel Gillies, and I work in global recruiting and staffing at Eli Lilly and Company here in the Indianapolis area. I have been in recruiting for about 6 years now, I do believe. I've stopped tracking. My experience in recruiting has been focused on campus recruiting, so focusing on students who are getting ready to enter in the job market. Experience recruiting, so folks who have maybe been in an industry for some time and trying to bring them into the organization. And then in most recent, my role has changed and transitioned in the recruiting space into a compliance recruiting space. So ensuring that the company and our business practices as they relate to recruitment are compliant with federal agencies, ensuring that there's no discriminatory practices in play as we try to recruit and bring talent into the organization. So that's just a little bit about me. Today's conversation is really going to be around acing the interview, and kind of talking through best practices of what to do, what not to do, as we think about the interviewing process. Um, and as Tiffany stated earlier, if you've got questions or want to chime in with some of your own recent experiences, it sounds like some of you guys have been out interviewing and may have some great information to bring into the group to have some knowledge share take place. Please feel free to chime in and certainly help with the conversation. With that, I will go ahead and get started here. So you got an interview. Now what? What's next? What things should I be doing as I think about before the interview, during the interview, and after the interview? When we think about the before interview activities that need to take place, I've got some tips here for you to consider or to think about. So learn about the company and the position for which you're applying. Taking time to understand the company, their organization, what's their corporate culture, what things do they care about, what things do they not care about um, in the industry. Are they in the news for something? Taking the time to learn a little bit about that company can help you tremendously when it comes to the interview or the interview process. And it allows you to really ensure that the company aligns with you as an individual and the things that you personally and maybe even professionally care about as an individual. The other item I would throw out there for our conversation is to prepare a few questions. What things do you want to know about the company? What things do you want to know about the position that you're being scheduled to interview for? This is a great time to think about maybe, bullet point one, the information you learn about the company and apply it and put it into a question for your interview. Then third bullet point here is practice how to answer tough interview questions. We've all heard as kids growing up that famous phrase of practice makes perfect. And over time, I feel confident that we've all learned that that is very true. So as you go into your interview, take that ideology and put it into play. Practice some interview questions. Go out to the internet, type in interview questions, see what pops up. There's going to be a long list of things that you can chew through and ask yourself the questions and form your responses to these questions. That way, when you get into that setting, you're in the interview, your nerves are setting in, you know how to navigate through those questions because you already have practiced them and you know exactly what you want to say and communicate back to your interviewer. An additional tip is to dress appropriately, wearing appropriate interview attire. You got to dress for the job you want, not the job that you have. I'm telling you guys, if I was on Skype today, you would question me in my level of professionalism. I'm sitting at home in yoga pants and a tank top. Would I wear that to an interview? I know you guys are on mute, but I guarantee you're all saying no. No, I would not wear that into an interview. What I would wear to an interview is maybe dress slacks, black, gray, tan, a button-up shirt that's a neutral color. Maybe I would wear dress shoes, maybe heels, flats. I would want to do my makeup in a way that was a little bit more soft and neutral, nothing too flashy. We're not going out to the nightclub on a hot date. Our date is a job, right? So we got to kind of dress in those more neutral tones with our makeup. Thinking about your hands and your nails as women, we like to wear nail polish. So, if your nail polish is a little bit chipped, scratched, or anything like that, you probably want to take that nail polish off going into your interview. So those are a few things that I think of when I think about dressing appropriately for an interview. And to add one more, your hair, thinking about how your hair should look for an interview. You just kind of want to look overall polished and groomed when we think about the overall dress and attire for an interview. So thinking about what you're going to wear before you go to the interview is certainly going to help you ace the interview. Know where you're going. This is where people go wrong more often than not. We hit bullet points 1 through 4, and then at bullet point 5, we fall a little short. We don't know where we're going. We think we maybe know where we're going, but we're not quite sure. This is where I would encourage individuals who are, have an interview scheduled to ask that recruiter and ensure with your recruiter, hey, what is the address? What door do I need to come in? Is there security? Do I need to have my ID ready? Those are things that are going to help you when you get to the interview. But having that address up front and in hand, I would encourage you to drive by. Drive and see how long it maybe takes you to get there. The GPS may say 10 minutes, and then it might actually end up being a 25-minute commute. And now, oh boy, you're going to be late to the interview. Doing the drive-by also ensures that you know where the entrance door is, you know where parking is. Those little things that are so natural to our day-to-day of driving someplace, going to someplace, parking, going into the store, right, are so easy for us to do. But when it comes to an interviewing and going to a place of an employment where they maybe have all kinds of different parking lots and parking garages, different access and entry point, I definitely encourage you to do that drive-by and just get your bearings with the facility. And then the next bullet point is to allow enough time to get there. Early is the new on time when it comes to interviewing. On time is late. So when it comes to your interviewing and getting ready to go to an interview, thinking about the time, right? The GPS may say 10 minutes, it may take me 25 minutes. I may be running a little bit behind. I may be running a little bit behind, but I still want to make sure I have enough time to still be early. So try to consider timing as well when you're preparing for your interview. The last piece I would encourage you to do is to take a notepad to jot down notes. This notepad, as a best practice, should or probably should include those questions that you're preparing for your interview that we kind of chatted through on bullet point 2 when we talked about preparing a few questions for your interview. Take that notepad that you're going to take into the interview, have those questions that you prepared, have a pen. That way, as you're having your conversation, you're having your interview, you're receiving information from your interviewer, you're able to jot notes and take things down and take them with you. That way you've got something to always reference should you need to have a continued conversation with anyone from the company or the organization. So now that we've talked about before the interview, we're going to talk a little bit about during the interview. A best practice when we talk about during the interview is to turn your cell phone off or leave it in the car. Turning your cell phone off or leaving it in the car allows the opportunity for those distractions that may come up in a typical day-to-day to be removed from that environment. And typically when you're interviewing maybe an hour, 2 hours. So it's a very short period of time where you're just kind of going without that mobile device. The last thing that you want is to be in an interview having a great conversation and then all of a sudden your phone rings and now you're interrupting that interaction with your interviewer. So turn it off or leave it in your car. The next one is to remove candy or gum before the interview. We don't want to have things in our mouth that are going to be distracting or hinder the conversation or the interview. So don't chew gum in your interview, and don't have candy in your interview. Remember to, one, be on time, and then remember your interview starts the moment you're on the property. So the moment that you arrive, the moment you pull up into the parking garage in your vehicle, that is the moment that your interview begins. It doesn't start when you start having that one-on-one interview conversation right behind a closed door. It begins the moment that you come onto that campus. I could tell you of situations where I've had folks come on campus to interview. They were extremely rude to maybe a security guard or the folks who check you in and set you up with a badge for the day. And I hear about that as a recruiter because I interact very closely with our security team when it comes to organizing and getting somebody on campus. So those experiences that you're creating with somebody who may not directly be involved in your interview are things that do get back to recruiters and actually end up becoming a part of a closed door conversation when we talk and discuss our hiring decisions. So remember, your interview starts as soon as you get on the property. Handshakes, and this is typically a fun activity when we're in a classroom, but with handshakes, you want them to be soft and firm when it comes to the handshake. Too soft is just as bad as too hard. So working on finding that happy medium when it comes to the handshake process. I know with a lot of things going on with COVID-19, some folks are a little hesitant to shake hands. So if you kind of feel that way, I think it's okay to convey that to your interviewer of, hey, they stick out their hand, hey, I with everything going on, I just don't feel right shaking hands. I think that's okay to say. In the very beginning stages of COVID-19 going on and being in the workplace environment, folks, instead of doing handshakes, we're doing fist bumps. It'll be very interesting to see how handshakes play out in the future as folks start to return to work and going into interviews and things of that nature. If you do find yourself in a handshake situation, I think some other tips I would throw in here is you want your handshakes to be web to web. So if you look at your hands, right, between your thumb and your index finger, there's a little web. You want that web of your hand to match or join the web of the individual's hand that you're shaking. Um, with handshakes, you want to make good eye contact with that individual, letting them know that you see them, you're acknowledging them. Usually words are exchanged during a handshake of, it's nice to meet you, how are you doing today, maybe stating your name. And handshakes usually last anywhere between 2 to 3 seconds. So you're not going to hold that hand too long. You're just going to hold it a very short period of time and maybe shake it, the hand up and down about 3 times. And then the last piece that you see here on the screen is to maintain good eye contact and posture during your interview. Our body language speaks volumes and communicates a message to an individual who is maybe just looking at you. So eye contact and posture can convey multiple things. It could maybe convey attitude, whether positive or negative. It could convey your confidence in yourself and what you're saying, maybe your overall interest in the position. Your posture can say, if you're leaning forward into a conversation, boy, I am so interested in this conversation and happy to have this conversation today. Whereas if your posture is maybe leaned back in your chair, maybe that communicates to an individual you're not quite engaged in the conversation, and maybe the tone of the conversation is not resonating with you. So be cognizant of your eye contact and posture during the interview. Another good one to call out is to be honest in the interview, to really communicate and share those experiences that are very true to you, true to your resume, and true to your work history. When we think about work history during the interview, in terms of work history, education, experiences, those things can be validated through maybe an education verification, an employment verification that the employer may do, or even come up in a reference check should you provide references or be requested to provide references. So all these things that you're maybe sharing or articulating in a conversation or interview can be verified and confirmed. So it's always encouraged just to be honest in the interviewing process. Let the employer bring up pay and benefits. This is a one that we typically have a thoughtful conversation around in the classroom. We all want to know a little bit about pay. We all want to know a little bit about the benefits. Sometimes as you are being recruited with a company, the recruiter may already share this information with you up front and say, hey, the pay for this position is X, Y, and Z. Does that work for you? Is that something that you are, in terms of compensation, does that meet your needs? Yes or no? So you will probably have a little bit of a feel in terms of compensation, pay, and benefits. However, I do encourage you to, if you have those questions, bring that up maybe specifically to the recruiter and not the interviewer. The interviewer is going to be a subject matter expert in that specific job, and they're not going to know necessarily about pay and benefits, whereas the recruiter is the one who's trying to bring you into the organization, bring you into the company, and recruit you, and has a better scope on pay, benefits, and compensation. If the employer does bring up compensation, pay, benefits during the interview, that is A-okay. I think that kind of gives you the green light to have a thoughtful conversation on that subject. But during the interview process, I would certainly encourage you to leave that up to the employer to navigate and drive that conversation. And then lastly, ask the interviewer a few questions about the company. This one I think is huge, and it's such a small, simple thing to do, is to have some questions for the interviewer. And you can maybe have a day where you have 3 interviews with 3 different people, and if you ask the same question to every person, that is fine. Each person is going to have their own perspective, and they're going to have their own response that may help you understand more in regards to the answers and the responses that you are looking for. Don't say, well, I already asked all my questions to Bob, so Susie, I don't have any questions for you. Bob already answered them. You don't want to do that. You want to ask all your questions to each of your interviewers. And if we did everything we said right on the previous slide where we talked about before the interview, bullet point number 2 was, after you research the company, you're going to jot down questions. And then the last bullet point was, you're going to bring that notepad with those questions. So if you took action on the pre-interview, before interview steps outlined, you're going to hit this bullet point and have those questions already teed up about the company and the questions that you want to ask to the interviewer specifically. All right, so we're going to move into the after interview process, and when to really kind of follow up, what seems appropriate, what doesn't seem appropriate. I would encourage you to send out a thank you note within 48 hours after your interview. Thank you notes go a very long way, and unfortunately, a lot of people do not do thank you notes. Thank you notes can be done in a digital platform. If you want to send an email to the recruiter who set up your interview day, thanking them for taking the time to consider you, scheduling a day, letting them know you enjoyed the conversation with XYZ individuals you met through the day, continuing to express that interest in that position goes a very long way. Recruiters Individuals who would receive thank you notes, such as your recruiters, maybe the individuals that you interviewed with, they love receiving those thank you notes from candidates. And if you had a good interaction with them during your interview and now they get a thank you note, that interaction went from good to great, right? You took another thoughtful step and approach to engaging in interacting with them, and essentially continuing the conversation through a thank you note. And then those individuals, right, the conversation just went from good to great. They're now going to get in a closed door conversation as they sit back and review all the candidates that they interviewed and now become an advocate for you. They're going to say, hey, I actually had now a great conversation with her, with this individual. She sent me a thank you note. I think sending a thank you note articulates a handful of things, right? Not only was she organized um, with her interview and did great with the questions, she sent a thank you note, which is, a great follow up. And that's how she's going to do her work. She's going to come prepared to work the way she came prepared for the interview. And then the thank you note is a follow up. So she's always going to be following up on the work that she does to make sure things have certainty. Folks have exactly what they need. That's great service that you're offering just by doing a simple thank you note. Like I said, customizing the note to articulate maybe the conversation you had with an individual helps. Um, Expressing that continued interest, all of those things can tie into a thank you note. I think a thank you note is anywhere between about a paragraph, so anywhere between 3 to 5 sentences expressing the thank you, a follow up on the interaction, a follow up on the interview, and expressing your interest in the position. And then another piece to think about when we go through the interview process is like, when do I call? When do I follow up? I sent my thank you note. It's been 2 days. I haven't heard anything. When is it appropriate for me as a candidate who received an interview to follow up? I would encourage you to not hesitate to call to check in if you haven't heard anything in 2 weeks. Usually, with interviewing, there will be several candidates that they'll bring in for an interview, and interviewing is based on calendars and availability. So based on the individual who's receiving an interview as well as the folks who are conducting the interview, they all have schedules to kind of keep and maintain. So sometimes when it comes to interviewing, it could take up to 2 weeks to make a hiring decision. I would encourage you, if you haven't heard anything about that 2-week period, to go ahead and follow up and reach out to your recruiter, your contact at the company, just to continue to express your interest and let them know that you're just seeking a follow-up. All right, so we're going to move into the next portion here, tough questions. What interests you about the job? And kind of talk a little bit about do's and don'ts. So from a do standpoint, when we're talking about what interests you in the job as you're in the interview, you want to show that you carefully considered the opportunity. You read the job description, you applied to it, you kind of understand the role and responsibility, and that you've considered that this is exactly what kind of job I would like to do. Having a clear answer for why you're interested is very important to be able to communicate to your interviewer. We don't want to leave them with the impression that a job is a job and I need a job. We want to leave them with the impression that I'm very interested. This is a job that I want to do and I'm interested because of XYZ reasons. I also encourage you to focus on how your skills are aligned with the position. So maybe you've got 8 years of experience in customer service and now you're interviewing for a customer service representative position. And so you've got all this great knowledge, skills, and abilities to do the job because you have 8 years of industry experience, and find a way during your interview. You now have a way during your interview to articulate and share back with your interview how your skills are aligned for this position. Also, think about sharing what attracts you to the company. So as you review the job description, there's usually some key information that the company will put in their job description of how long they've been in business, their industry, some things that they think would attract talent to the organization. You can find that stuff in that little blurb going out to the careers website, but trying to leverage that information just to have that conversation of why this company and why I want to work here. And then lastly, speak to the how the job fits with your career goals. Um, this is a good one as well. Most companies or most folks that you're going to interview with, um, they want to know a little bit more about your career goals, not just the job of today, but the job of tomorrow. They want to maybe hear about your ideas in terms of longevity, what would be maybe a next step for you coming into the organization, into this position, but into a future position. So be prepared to speak on that. When we think about the don'ts, you don't want to give the impression that you're just looking for a job. A job is a job and I need a job. You want to leave them with that impression that we honed in earlier of why you are interested in the position. At the end of the day, we really just want to help the employer see how you are essentially well matched with the position. So leaning on your experience, your knowledge, your skills, your abilities, your why, your how during the interview to match yourself to that company in that position. There are a couple sample responses out here that I think are good to kind of talk through. So for a customer service job, a response to some of the questions or a question you may receive during the interview could be, I'm passionate about career service or customer service, and I love interacting with people. This job will give me the chance to use my previous customer service experience to represent your company and give your customers the highest quality service. That's a great response. In this response, we're kind of honing in on a lot of those do's that we talked about on the previous slide. We'll talk about, let's move into this food service job example. I've always loved food and I like being able to provide customers with a great meal. I'm looking for a second shift position so that I can take classes in the morning and work in the afternoon and evening. Your opening was just the kind of position I was looking for. I've worked with two other restaurants, and yours would give me the chance to develop my skills even more. So if we think about both of these examples and some of the content on the previous slide, when we think about the do's, right, it does hit several buckets, both of these examples, customer service as well as the food service job example. The second example for food service, it gave a very clear answer for why we are interested in the position, right? They honed in on development of skills. That's kind of why I'm interested in this. It also offers, she talks about flexibility, right? I want to take classes in the morning and would like to work in the afternoon and evening. That is kind of something that sounds of attraction and a reason to be interested in the position. So I think these are two great examples to use and to kind of think through as you think about applying your skills and abilities and your why to some of these companies that you will be interviewing with in the future. All right, the next section is about the question, tell me a little about yourself. And we've all been in those interviews where we've been asked, tell me a little bit about yourself. And for whatever reason, talking about ourselves is the most difficult thing to do. It's hard to tell somebody what a great, wonderful, amazing, talented person I am. For whatever silly reason, we all struggle with it. So as you are thinking about going into your interview, I want to tee up some of these things that I think you should hone in on and would want to tell an employer about yourself. So you can talk about what makes you a good fit for the position that they are trying to fill. Maybe you've got, in that previous example I gave earlier, 8 years of experience in customer service. That's what makes you a good person or for the position, right? Nobody else has the experience that I have. I've been doing this for 8 years. I'm an expert in customer service, right? You can even talk a little bit about your work ethic. Talk about how reliable you are, how trustworthy and dependable you are. Working in customer service, right? You need to be reliable, right? Like, oh, I'm going to say exactly what I'm going to do exactly what I say. And here's an example of how I've done that in the past. Trustworthy. Maybe working in a call center environment, you're dealing with maybe sensitive information. Maybe that may be a situation. And so we need somebody who's going to be trustworthy because you're going to be dealing with sensitive information, maybe such as social security numbers, etc. Moving on to the next bullet point, transferable skills you have from prior education, current education, experience, or training that you can use on the job. Transferable skills and being able to articulate and talk about your transferable skills is huge. Sometimes with our resumes, we think, okay, hey, it's all on my resume. They read my resume. They know what my skills are. That's why they call me to interview. And that is a small piece of the pie. But I think the other piece is really being able to talk about those skills, talk about things that you've learned from your education and how you have applied those learnings into your current job or a prior job. Talk about some of the experience or trainings that you received, and how you have applied them, maybe to a situation that you most recently dealt with. Being able to talk about your education, your training, your experience, and how you have used that and applied that in a real world example can tell a great short story to whomever you're interviewing with, and allows you in addition to talk and brag about yourself just a little. Lastly, how your personality will fit with the job or the company. Being able to talk about, hey, I'm an upbeat individual. Um, am very I'm an extrovert. That's how my personality fits into this organization. I'm going to be upbeat because I'm an extrovert. Maybe I'm an introvert and I'm quiet, and that's okay because I get my work done. You can hone in on your personality and your traits, and try to make that fit into the job or into the company. One thing to call out from a don't share standpoint, is sharing unnecessary information about yourself and your family. Um, Things that come top to mind reading this bullet point is your age. Um, you don't need to share information about your age, because that has nothing to do with the job. Maybe personal information about your family. Maybe my cousin's in the hospital, or maybe you're even talking about your own personal information when we think about maybe your own health concerns. Those are things that I would steer clear of when it comes to the interview. Of course, you want folks to get to know you personally and professionally in a very short period of time. But those are some of the things that I would say to stay clear of, and really just focus on your conversation of how things relate to the job and the work that you would be doing. Okay, so we've got some sample responses here for customer service cashier job. I'm interested in this job because I love customer service. I am dependable and goal oriented. In my previous position as a cashier, my supervisor relied on me to be there on time, provide great customer service, and work as a member of a team at all times. I'm familiar with scheduling shifts and have trained a new coworker on the cash register. So this example really hones in on a couple of things that we talked about on the previous slide. So this individual is honing in on the fact that they're dependable and goal-oriented. They're talking about being able to train other coworkers. So that kind of shows, I'm an expert in customer service as a cashier, and able to train other new hires and kind of get them up to speed so that they can do the job just as good as I am. This next example, let's read through this one. For an accounting clerk job, I love numbers and I've always been good at math. With over 15 years experience working in the accounts payable, accounts receivable department at XYZ company, I have a diverse experience with all aspects of basic accounting principles. I enjoy working as a team and consistently deliver high quality work on tight schedules. So this individual is honing in and leveraging their experience, 15 years of experience. That's a great background, where I would imagine somebody has probably seen it all in 15 years when it comes to accounts payable and accounts receivable. It sounds like this individual, they hone in on delivering high quality work in tight schedules. So being able to work through difficult situations and maybe even prioritizing tasks is honestly what is being communicated to me in these examples. So again, think through some of your responses as it relates to talking through your strengths and your experiences. And these two examples are very good ways to get you started. All right, so this question is, what is your greatest weakness? When we think about this question, would encourage you to provide an honest and undamaging answer. And then follow up with a positive example of how you overcame the negative aspect, right? The don't in this area is to offer information that presents you in a bad light. And then the next one is offer information that may hinder your ability to get the job. So we want to be honest, but we don't want to be damaging. We want to provide information and examples, but we don't want those examples or information to be perceived as negative weaknesses. So let's jump into some of these examples here. My education level is my weakness. I don't have any formal training or diploma, which I know limits my employment choices. I'm enrolled in school now and plan to go and pursue a degree. That is a wonderful response. It hones in on the weakness, but it also hones in on the action and the potential outcome. So this individual is going to continue their education and is enrolling in school to pursue a degree. That's great. Next sample question. I'm not a morning person, but I need to be at work and actively working at 7 a.m. sharp. To make this possible, I changed my whole household routine. Now we get everything ready for the next day and the night before. This makes things quicker and less stressful in the morning. This is a great example. It kind of starts off a little negative. I was thinking, well, where is this person going? They're not a morning person. And I assumed that the position maybe is a morning position. However, they spun this negative greatly into a positive by talking about change in routine, establishing new habits to make things easier for them in the morning to remove stress. And this is another great example because it tells me about a past behavior that has changed and can apply into a position where, she's maybe dealing with a difficult situation. She understands the challenge and the difficulty, right? And then she's going to think it through, apply a change, and that change is going to make things easier and better for her in a work situation. The next example, I have time management issues. Sometimes I spend too much time making sure things are perfect. I've learned to use tasks on my calendar, to to prioritize my work and keep me on track. This is another great example of thinking about time management. Time management can be a huge challenge when it comes to getting daily tasks done and as it relates to work. But using tools and resources that are available to you, like tasks on my calendar, can really help you prioritize, protect your time, and ensure that you're able to get that work done. All right, the next question here is, what is your greatest strength? Um, answer the questions as it relates to the position you are applying for. Another do is to share traits and skills that set you apart from your competition and to be truthful. A don't is hesitate to answer this. Hesitation communicates multiple things to an interviewer. It's your responsibility to tell them about your strengths and why they should hire you. So some sample responses. I pride myself on my ability to handle challenge and being positive in fast-paced, stressful situations. Next sample. When I am working on a project, I don't want just to meet deadlines. Rather, I prefer to complete the project well ahead of schedule. Great example. I have exceeded my sales goals every quarter, and I've earned a bonus each year since I started with my current employer. Another great example. My time management skills are excellent. I'm organized, efficient, and take pride in excelling at my work. And a last example, I pride myself on my customer service skills and my ability to resolve what could be difficult situations. All right, let's move into talking a little bit about the employer's goal. Essentially, employers are looking for the best match for the position. We want to hire somebody who has the knowledge, skills, and ability to do this job. Maybe it's somebody who would come in and hit the ground running, somebody who would need minimal training to get started and to excel. They also want to find someone who is a good match for the company. It costs employers more money to fill a position and hire somebody, hire, recruit, train an individual than it is to ensure somebody is a good fit for the company. So if I could hire the right person who's great for the position and great for the company on take one, then that's more money saved for the company and less time and stress um, on trying to fill the position, and allows us to focus on getting the work done. All right, the behavioral interview. Their main goals are to assess a candidate's behavior and approaches by exploring specific situations, and to analyze past behavior to try to predict future performance. That's essentially what a behavioral interview is. Past performance is the best indicator of future performance. Interviewers will expect to hear about specific situations or scenarios. Initial questions are typically followed by follow-up questions. And specific key details related to situation scenarios are expected when it comes to behavioral interviewers. When we navigate back to the responses we reviewed on the previous slides, those are all great examples of behavioral type questions, but also very strong examples of behavioral responses. So if you're struggling with this, or needing some assistance, you can always leverage those examples in the slide deck to help you get started or think through your experiences. Or you can always use what we call the STAR method. And the STAR method is an acronym to help you think through and tailor your responses to behavioral-based interviews by leveraging your past experiences, again, to predict future performance. So with STAR, the S stands for situation. So what was the context? What was the situation at hand that you found yourself dealing with? And giving and providing that background to set the scene for the situation you're going to talk the interviewer through in your response. The T in the STAR method stands for task. So what was the specific problem or need? What were you tasked with? So, and we'll get into some examples later. Action. What did you do? What actions did you take? How did you try to resolve the situation at hand? Focus on the what you did or what you said. How did you act? How did you react? And what was the outcome is going to tie into the R, which stands for results. What happened? You had a situation, you took an action. Um, what was the outcome? What took place? What was the result? And share that outcome and actions with the interviewer in the example that you'll provide. So I'm going to jump into a quick example using the STAR method here on the next slide. So the question here, it's a behavioral-based question. So tell me about a time that your work experience, excuse me, let me back it up. I got that all tongue-tied. Tell me about a time from your work experience when your manager or supervisor was unavailable and a problem arose. How did you handle it? All right, so using the STAR method, the response in this example, remember we're honing in on what the situation was. My manager was on break and I was at the cash register on my own when a woman brought back her hamburger saying it was not cooked properly. Oh boy. The task. She wanted a new meal and a refund. All right, so let's jump into action. What did we do to handle this situation? In this response, I asked the kitchen to make her a new hamburger and gave her a coupon off the next order. I couldn't refund her money without the manager's signature. I apologized and stayed calm. As a result or outcome to this, the woman left happy and even came back the next week. This is a great example. In a very short period of time, I have learned and understood the past behavior by understanding the situation that this individual was dealt with and how they navigated and remedied the situation by cooking the new hamburger, providing a coupon, and ensuring that the customer understood the situation and left happy and even was a return or repeat customer. All right, so we have about 5 minutes left in our scheduled time together. I believe we were concluding today's session at 11 o'clock. I am going to just kind of open up the line and see if there are any questions or concerns that I can try to help you guys navigate through. Unfortunately, we did not get through all the slides today, but I think a lot of the information that we were able to come through is extremely helpful. So with that, I will turn it over to the group and see if there's any questions I can try to respond to today.
Thank you, Chanel. Will we have access to all of the slides even though you didn't complete them?
I do believe Tiffany stated at the beginning of the presentation she would be sending yesterday's slides and this slide deck out after today's session.
Yep.
Okay, so you'll make them all available. Okay, thank you so much. And
You're
then
welcome.
my other question, okay, my other question is, when is the right time to offer references in the hiring process for your company?
Oh, that's great. So each company, I know you said my company, but I'm just going to talk about it from an umbrella approach. Each company really has their own procedures when it comes to the reference check process and where at in the process that may or may not take place. Lilly, as an organization, we no longer conduct reference checks. So I would encourage you to rely on the individual who contacts you to interview, to provide you a timeline or notify you when that information is required. Sometimes with companies, the reference piece is on the application. So from the moment that you apply, you're already inserting your references with your application submittal. Sometimes that's not required until they have expressed the intent to hire you and send you an offer letter and you've accepted your offer letter. That may be when they initiate the reference check process. So understand that that's contingent on each company and their process. And I would encourage you to rely on the individual you're connected with to understand when in the process that will take place.
Thank you very much.
You're most welcome. Any other questions out there?
Well, I just had a comment. Um, when we were going over the slide, as an example, where the individual was talking about they wanted to go to school during the day and listed some other things, I've always been weary in an interview to explain too many things that I'm doing, worried that the potential employer may think that I may be too preoccupied to disclose those kind of things.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I was just, when you were talking about it, it made me a little bit more comfortable because I'm also a student as well. To mention that, although I've already worked my schedule around a typical 9 to 5 schedule,
Uh-huh.
I just have always been uncomfortable disclosing that because I didn't want them to think I wasn't going to be reliable
Yeah.
because I was doing too much.
Yeah, that's totally understandable, quite honestly. I think sometimes it's like striking the right balance of like what's too much to say and what's enough to say, and then trying to identify like what's really important to you, right? And with education, I think that just shares so much positive as opposed to negative um, for an employer. You know, they want to see somebody who's continuing their education, invested in themselves now as well as in the future. So if you've got the opportunity to bring that up, go for it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Good luck with school. All right. Well, we are at 11 o'clock, and I want to be cognizant of everybody's time. I will turn it over to Tiffany, but before doing so, if you have questions or concerns or start to go throughout your day and want to follow up with me, please don't hesitate to do so. Tiffany's got my contact information. I'm available to help you guys day or night as you go into your career search and into interviews. So please don't hesitate to leverage me as a resource.
Awesome. Thank you, Chanel. Thank you, everybody, for jumping on. I will get the PowerPoints to Liz so she can get them sent out. And then hopefully we'll see you guys next week for the HR panel that we have on Tuesday at 10.
Yes, you will. Thanks, Tiffany. Thanks, Chanel.
Thank you. Have a
You're
good day.
welcome.